evil entity in the house.
You are about to see real people
I was terrified beyond belief.
reliving horrifying paranormal encounters for the first time.
And there was this dark image right behind me.
There's no mistaking that is a human body.
As ghost soldiers come back to haunt the living.
He was a war hero to this country.
I buried this for nearly 30 years.
Be prepared to be afraid.
Story 18, Ben. Take 2, marker.
I am a retired Marine, doing nearly 24 years in the Marine Corps. About every 3 or 4 years, the Marine Corps moves you, your whole household. It uproots you. Connecticut was open, and I said, well, I'll take the Connecticut because my wife is from Connecticut.
Constantly moving wasn't the hardest part of Ben's job. Among his responsibilities was the sad duty of informing the next of kin when a soldier had died in combat.
Then when we start the procedure of getting the remains home, I get to the funeral home. I open it to make sure his uniform and everything is correct. I'll make sure he's ready for a presentation. And then I'm there with the family every day. We're looking for a place to live at now in Connecticut to settle down. We were looking around the state, you know, some of the nicer areas, and somehow this email popped up with this house in Meriden. So we're like, we'll go check it out, you know. So as we pulled in the driveway, we saw this huge barn in the back.
Ben and his wife Janice experienced a strong draw towards the barn.
There was people had packed up all their tubs and stuck them out there. And they all said Janice on it, which was my wife's name. And took that as a sign, first of all, that her name was on it all over the inside of the barn. So when we went in the house to see the family who owned the house, a gentleman and his wife, turned out he was a Marine. So with all those signs, we said, no, this must be the house. We bought the house in December and ended up moving in January. But I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the barn. And suddenly, it just started coming to me. And I started hanging up my flags that we'd flown in Fallujah. We started putting up things on the walls just of my time in the Marines. We have pictures of everybody who was killed while we were over there, of everybody who had to notify their families. Those who have come back and have committed suicide, we've added them to their pictures to the wall. So when people come up there, they can see them, remember them the way they were.
The barn became a memorial to the soldiers that Ben had encountered during his military career.
I was in my house one night, about 9:30, when I suddenly get these feelings when my hair stands up. They say, you need to come out to the barn. I have no explanation for it. It's just, I get a sense, and I go out to the barn.
Ben was certain that he had heard footsteps upstairs.
The you can clearly hear footsteps and running back and forth up there, shuffling. And the wind and everything just stopped. And then as I looked on the wall, one of the pictures of the guys had been taken off the nail. And when you look at that little ledge there, there's no way it could have fell that far. It was obviously taken down, set. And it was off the nail. Not only was it off the nail, but the nail was gone. I said, something's wrong. And I couldn't figure out what. And I sat there for a little while. And I said, something's happened to somebody. Or somebody's going in that spot. And it's not going to be a Marine. Which at the time I was very concerned because my oldest son was in Afghanistan in the Army.
Ben was deeply troubled, but did his best to put the worrying thoughts out of his mind.
The next day I went to a benefit concert. Someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, Ben, we have a mother over here, and she's crying. Do you mind talking to her?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." I'm talking to her, and Turner was in the Army. He had lost both legs in Afghanistan, came back, and got killed in a car accident. So I was trying to make her feel better and talking to her about the barn. And she goes, "Well, I have a picture of him. Can you hang it in the barn?" So I brought it back. This was the next day after that night at the barn. So I brought that back and I put that picture. So it was almost... The crazy coincidences, I don't know. But, I mean, the barn told me there was going to be somebody. My mind starts saying, okay, am I imagining this stuff? Am I making this stuff up for myself? You know, because being in the war so many times, or... And I almost thought, do I need to go to a psychiatrist? And I had this barn gathering. I do it once a year. And Kurt happened to come to it. He was a Vietnam-era vet.
I met Ben when we were both members of a veterans organization that was concerned with fundraising for veterans activities. And he found out what I do is a vocation, paranormal investigation.
And we talked about a few minutes. He goes, you know, if you like, you know, I'd like to come and set up at the barn. And at the time, I wasn't good with it. It was many, many months before I felt comfortable with the notion of him coming and doing the cameras. And I didn't want to say there's nothing here and maybe kill it for the families who did believe. I was still very neutral, but I was at the point where my head was really confused on everything that was happening in the barn and that so many other people were noticing also.
Ben's hope was that Kurt would provide answers to the unexplained events in the barn.
The day of the investigation, we arrived about 7 o'clock. We set up our cameras, we set up recording equipment, infrared illuminators.
Getting something here. It's really hot here, Ben.
Former Marine Ben Granger was having strange experiences in his barn.
Yeah, I'm getting something here. It's really hot here, Ben.
He turned to a paranormal investigator to find answers.
I've been investigating the paranormal for about 35 years. This was probably the most intense experience that I personally had had in all that time. It definitely wanted to let me know it was around, and it did.
But I was basically, holy shit. That's all I could say.
We were able to confirm a lot of the things that Ben had claimed.
You could see a dark figure standing to the left of him. There's no mistaking that is a human body.
They realized that they're not crazy, that there is something going on there, and someone else was able to prove it.
You see that?
Yeah. And just as the shadow figure passed in front of Ben, we'd heard the name Dave loud and clear.
Unbelievable.
The next steps were to bring Karen Hollis in.
Karen Hollis is a psychic medium with a gift for contacting spirits.
Before I even got to Ben's house, I was turning the corner. And no sooner did I turn the corner than I heard in my backseat of my vehicle, "Hi, I'm Dave." Dave. And then I knew I had a discarnate spirit with me already.
Karen, as a clairaudient medium, has the ability to make contact with deceased family members, deceased friends. She was able to tell Ben things that she could not possibly have had prior knowledge of.
My take on Ben, when I mentioned Dave's name, was that he immediately kind of recoiled and looked at me in a very confused way, as if to say, "How do you know who Dave is?"
As Karen began her investigation, she knew she was not alone.
Dave?
I was the first.
And David was the first casualty that I had to notify the mother.
Karen explained to Ben that the barn memorial had drawn the spirits of Dave and other fallen soldiers.
I do believe a memorial acts as an invitation to open up a portal for spirits to come back and come through. Spirits will use that memorial or that invitation to maybe get one last message across.
I started to experience voices. Each one of the men in the barn started to tell their story one after the other. And then I would see and experience flashes of the battle of his particular death. Dave stood by each one of the young men as they came forward, and he let them tell their stories first. He was the last one to tell his story.
Former Marine Ben Granger was having strange experiences in his barn and had invited in a medium. She quickly made contact with one of the soldiers from Ben's past.
Dave left himself for very last to tell his story. And he spoke of how he was hit and how the bullet went and hit him in the head and how he was killed. He gave me very specific information to tell Ben, and knowing that if he gave me that evidential information, Ben would know that it was definitely him. And he said to tell Ben that he specifically appreciated the fact that Ben had taken special care to make sure that the mortician had worked to cover the left-hand side of his head because it had taken out a part of his skull. And he did not want his mother or his father to be upset by that wound.
I knew this because when I prepared the body for viewing at the funeral home, we had placed a big white towel underneath his head to kind of hide all the bandages where the funeral home had fixed him up. So when you looked at him, you had no idea there was a hole in the side of his head. He was the very first one that I notified. When I moved to Connecticut, I had to go notify a family that he was killed.
And he almost burst into tears because he knew it was Dave. He knew there was no way that it could be anyone else.
Knowing that the ghost soldiers were sending positive messages, Ben was reassured they meant no harm. He felt the spirits supported his efforts to honor them.
And these young men wanted him to know how much they appreciated him. In fact, one of the young men even spoke about that there was always an honor guard there at the barn, and that's why they were hearing footsteps. And they would hear the footsteps all night long sometimes. And it's the most guarded barn, I think, in Meriden, Connecticut.
I do believe that the type of people we are when we're alive carries over into the spirit realm. A sense of duty, of protection that you did once here on Earth, you can have that same desire to do that in the spirit realm.
As a Marine, your job's never done. You take care of your Marines. And it felt a sense that even though these guys had lost their lives, and there's quite a few on the wall, that I was still in a sense taking care of them, allowing them to maybe get closure with their family, see their families, put them even in spirit form in a better or happier place, which is the barn.
Losing a life while serving in the military can leave a lot unsaid. With no preparation to leave the physical world, fallen soldiers have been known to travel across continents to get a message home.
Christian interview, take one.
I joined the military in 2006, and I did deploy to Afghanistan with Task Force 110 in May of 2010. I was excited but scared. The idea of going overseas to me is why I joined the military, and it's kind of in my family. As far as my name goes back, there's somebody that's been in the military. On the 24th of May, we were doing a normal resupply mission. I was the rear security for the vehicle, so in the crewman trade, we call it the gib, the guy in back. He stands in the back of the vehicle and watches out of the rear. And my vehicle ended up striking an IED.
The explosion would have a lasting effect on Christian.
I was ejected about 120 feet or so from the vehicle. After that, all I remember is yelling for my driver, and I got no response.
Christian's driver had been badly wounded.
I remember doing first aid on him, and then I lost consciousness due to shock. He unfortunately was killed that day. Because of my injuries, I had to come home early. And my daughter was born November 11th, so I was able to witness the birth and see my daughter born. And I remember holding her for the first time. It was the best day of my life.
After the trauma of combat, Christian was grateful for the tranquility of family life. But the calm would prove to be short-lived.
I started hearing knocking that you kind of just brush off because you thought it's your house creaking or expanding. And it just intensified, that's all. I thought somebody was in the house. And I have some kit from when I was overseas.
Christian D'Andrea had recently experienced the death of his friend while on duty in Afghanistan, quickly followed by the birth of his daughter. His instincts were on high alert when he thought he heard an intruder in his home.
And I freaked out and grabbed my gun. And I walked around my house, and there's nothing there. I kind of just tried to brush it off and ignore it.
But the events were not so easily ignored.
One day, I was talking to my neighbors. I think me and my neighbor were outside having a cigarette. We're just talking, and I asked him, like, what time are you putting the girls to bed? And he's just like, well, they've been in bed since 6:30, 7. And I was just like, oh. He goes, why? I was like, well, I keep hearing banging and running over from your place. And he said the same thing. He's like, well, I thought you guys were fooling around or whatever because I can hear the same thing. And that's when I started thinking that there's something else there.
One of Christian's friends also had strange experiences in the house.
What she told me is she saw 3 things standing behind her. And then they all turned and walked away. And when she turned around, there was nothing there. I was like, okay, well, you're over-exaggerating.
I think there's something in the house. I have no idea what it is.
So she went over next door and got my neighbor, and he came over and searched my house, and there was nothing there. She was scared to be in there. If I'm in the basement, if I'm walking past the basement stairs, looks like there's someone standing at the bottom of the stairs. And then I look, and there's nothing there. But you can hear footsteps, legitimate footsteps, walking up and down the hallway. I thought someone was in the house. I don't even know how to explain it. You can feel a vibe of like somebody else is in the house. And that bothered me. Like you have that helpless feeling.
When you're dealing with something that I like to term as a phantom draft or a phantom vibration, it's a lot different. You feel a sense that not only is your spider senses tingling, but that something's there, and you may catch something at the corner of your eye. When it gets that strong, the indications are a good percentage that you may be visited by an unknown entity.
I was in my house alone. Isabella was with her mother for the weekend, and I was laying in bed, and it sounded like someone was actually punching the wall from the room behind me. My headboard actually shook and smacked up against the wall a few times. At first, I was scared. Like, what's going on? Who's that? What is that?
The force went from shaking the bed to pressure on Christian's chest, disabling him.
I can't move, can't yell, I can't talk, I can't do anything. And it feels like someone's sitting or standing on my chest. It almost looks like someone's kind of standing in the room, watching, I guess. Then I wake up a little while later and I'm just scared. Like, what just happened to me?
A lot of time the spirit will appear at nighttime, and I've dealt with many cases of spirits going, hovering over somebody's bed or beside them. A lot of times it is to give a message, and that theme is always reoccurring. It's there for a reason. What that reason is hard to detect, but usually it's to give a message, to tell you something, maybe forewarn you of something, or simply to say, I know you can see me, what are you going to do about it?
The events were escalating. Christian's daughter became scared to sleep in her bedroom.
She said, there's a man in my closet. There's a man in my room. And I asked, like, okay, does he hurt you? Does he touch you? Does he talk to you? What does he do? And all she would say is, he talks, or he stands there. And it scares her, because it's dark. I actually thought somebody was coming into my house, but my doors are always locked. You have to walk past my room to get to Isabella's room, and it was winter. And so I looked outside, and there was no footprints leading up to any of the windows. And while the doors were still locked in the morning, I took the closet door off, and actually I put a camera in her room to see what was going on, and I caught nothing. And I thought I was sleepwalking, so I put baby powder in the door, or in the hallway outside of my door. Nothing. Nothing was ever there. So I thought, okay, well, something's going on.
After returning from a tour of duty in Afghanistan, Christian D'Andrea had been experiencing strange events in his home.
My mom she was sitting on the couch. Isabella was at daycare, I believe. And a picture flew off the wall. So it was just like, okay. She called me right away. I came home, I looked. Well, she didn't touch anything. She left it there so I could see it. And it was a picture of Isabella about 3.5 feet from the wall. And my mom said it just came off and dropped.
Katie Turner is a paranormal investigator with the Petawawa Supernatural Research Society.
As soon as we walked into the house alone, I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. Whoever it was did not want me there. I was getting pain in my arm, and I was getting pain in my head. I was getting a very bad headache. I could feel, I could hear, I could see an entity.
As Katie started to make contact with the spirit, she was guided downstairs to the basement.
We have a PSB7 spirit box, and what it does is it sweeps through radio frequencies at an extremely fast rate, and it is able to pick up, it's almost like a phone for the spiritual side. So they are able to talk through it, and we can hear them in real time. So we ask questions, and it will answer. And as soon as I got into the basement, I knew right away. That's where I picked up Christian's friend.
She asked, are you attached to the house or are you attached to the family? And you can hear family. What do you think of Christian? He's a good man. Are you worried about him? Yes. She said it was someone that you knew.
I could feel an entity. He was very standoffish. He did not want us to be there. He was nervous. It wasn't as if he was evil. He just didn't want us there. In that area was some kit and equipment that Christian had. And I believe that there was an attachment there to it.
Katie told him that the spirit was his friend and driver the day of the explosion in Afghanistan.
It was a lot to take in at once, a little emotional, but it felt good at the same time, knowing that it's not some random man, it's somebody I know, who I know was a gentle guy, a gentle man, meant no harm to anybody, just wanted attention, and now he has it. He was a war hero to this country, so he may be gone, but he's still here. And it just proves that they're gone but not forgotten.
Now that Christian understands the presence in his home, the violent episodes have stopped, and he knows that his fallen comrade remains by his side. When a person passes away with outstanding business to take care of, that's often enough of a reason for them to stick around in the physical world until they can give their message.
Story 10, take 1.
My mother and I and my brother moved into the home when I was about 5 years old. That was probably 1957. My great-grandfather built the home. He ordered it through Sears catalog, put it together by number, followed the directions. I grew up there, went to school there, have still friends and family in the neighborhood. It's a fabulous house, but many skeletons live in that house. My mother and I were sitting in the front room, and it was about 10 o'clock at night on a school night. My daughter was in bed. She had been there since like 8 o'clock. And all of a sudden, she comes flying down the steps with this scared look on her face, saying the stereo came on. And I just kind of, yeah, okay.
It's just the radio. It's okay, okay.
And I says, something must have started it. And was about 20 minutes later, after I had tucked her back in. Again, it just turned on by itself. She said, Mom, I'm not sleeping in there because the stereo turned on again. I thought, well, maybe the plug was jostled. You know, I just kind of wrote it off. I didn't think any more about it.
But the stereo switching on by itself turned out to be just the beginning.
It was after that that I started hearing things in the kitchen. I worked afternoons, so I would come in to relax, unwind, watch the news. And I would hear things jiggle, like when somebody opens a refrigerator, the bottles. And cupboard doors, same thing. I hear them open. I have a magnetic strip that holds them shut, and I'll hear it click, like somebody opened it. I'd go in and refrigerator door was closed. Nothing's moved, nothing's changed, everything's the same. A day or two later, I was upstairs, making sure everything was ready for the next day of school. And I came down the steps from upstairs, and the kitchen cupboard doors, there was 3 of them open. And I went to check to see if my son had been up in the kitchen, and he wasn't. And I shut the doors, went back and sat down. I was doing some homework myself. And the door was open, and I didn't hear it open. And I was sitting there. And then when my son was in the basement, he made the basement his bedroom. And I had gone to the basement steps to say goodnight.
Judy Spihar had lived in her family home for decades when she started noticing strange events. The incidents started to occur more frequently and became more frightening.
And I turned around, and there was this dark image right behind me. It was not black, but almost a dark gray. And I covered my face. I would tell people my stories, and they'd all look at me like I was crazy. Oh, it's just a imagination thing. You know, nothing like that happens. There's no such thing as spirits or ghosts.
Judy struggled to understand the weird incidents.
I'm sleeping one night, and then I could hear something, but I wasn't sure what it was. And I could feel like somebody walking with their hands and knees up the side of me. I could feel the indent in the mattress. It was scary. At first, I thought it was the dog moving, and I noticed the dog was in the same spot. And then I was thinking it was the cat, because I have 2 cats. And there was nothing there. I have a street light that comes in through the window. And there was nothing there, but I could feel the indent.
The bizarre events could no longer be ignored. Judy needed help.
My sister-in-law introduced me to Ken so that we could find out if there really was something or if it was my imagination.
When we first got to Judy's house, the overwhelming feeling in the house was that the presences that were there, it did feel like family. During the investigation, we kept getting a series of EVPs, call Beth. Beth, Beth. Very emphatic. So it was definitely a man's voice.
When Ken told me, I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say because I hadn't thought of Beth in years. Beth was married to my brother Mike, who had passed away.
Mike had died in the late 1970s in a farming accident.
I believe that they may tap around the person that they want and go to somebody else because maybe they can communicate better with them. Maybe that can be more of a, I'd like to use the term a validation of who it is, and then that person can take the message over, and it's easy to hear that way sometimes.
I went on Facebook to see if I could find her, and luckily I did.
Mike and I were married in December of '68. We had 4 days to plan our wedding. We had 10 days together honeymooning before he left for Vietnam. So January of '70 was when he returned. And we filed for divorce because when he returned, he was so different than he was when he left. A lot of years I carried a lot of guilt because I didn't stick with him like our vows said.
Beth was not the only one with unsettled emotions.
Well, at this point, it's pretty clear that somebody wants to get a message to Beth.
So I went to the investigation, and it was after midnight.
In my mind, I was more concerned about what does this spirit want with her in the first place.
And I kept feeling cold breezes on the back of my neck, or the hair would stand up on my arm. What I sensed was that there was a lot more energy in the room.
Beth heard something that blew her mind.
We could hear Mike saying, "Beth, I love you." Oh, it still gives me goosebumps.
Beth's dead ex-husband, Mike, had made contact.
I believe entities can come back if they have unfinished business, especially if they die tragically. They can come back to give a message.
My whole body got that sense of being shocked. I mean, from my fingers to my toes, and all the hair on my body stood up, and it was like a jolt of electricity shooting right through me. Hearing from him and hearing him say that he still loved me, and it made me realize that he wasn't angry at me, or that I could let go of the guilt I'd been carrying around. And it just gave me so much more peace. So that was important for me to know, that he wasn't like mad at me, or it's almost, I felt like he was still hanging around because he needed to get that message to me, because he could see all these years I was carrying around all this guilt for not staying with him.
Mike wanted her there for a reason. He wanted to make a closure, I believe, of what was going on with him and her. He wanted her to know that he was okay, and that done was the right thing.
And how do you feel about the house now?
I always feel comfortable in the home. I love it. I just wish I could figure out who's crawling up the bed.